Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our Talks with Walt as we are constituting our reading of each of the poems of Whitman's Leaves of Grass. We now turn to Song of Myself, passage number 26. Now, we enter a new section in our study of Song of Myself. Section 26 through 38 has sometimes been seen as a unit. I think it's good to do it this way. The poet's microscopic vision, as it's sometimes been called by scholars. In other words, the way in which from the commonplace, from ordinary life, Whitman's able to find some kind of mystical significance, especially as it relates to the five senses. We'll pay attention to that. Now, I want to remind you that it was in passage 4 that we pointed out one of those great lines, both in and out of the game, and watching and wondering at it, I witness and wait. I think that's one of the significant lines of Song of Myself. And we're going to come back to that whole idea of the ways in which listening is a huge part of it. Now, if you haven't been following our stuff at LearnStrong.net, I recommend that you do that. Of course, Talks with Walt down that left-hand side. My hope is that you've been following us for the 24 poems of inscriptions, starting from Paumanok, the passages 1 through 19, and then finally, of course, Song of Myself, passages 1 through, of course, 25. Now, as we said, there are a lot of ways to listen. And Whitman is going to play around with that now in passage 26. Let's just enjoy the ways that he'll play the game. Now, I will do nothing but listen. To accrue what I hear into the song, to let sounds contribute toward it. I hear bravaras of birds, bustle of growing wheat, gossip of flames, clack of sticks cooking my meals. I hear the sound I love, the sound of the human voice. I hear all sounds running together, combined, fused, or following, sounds of the city and sounds out of the city, sounds of the day and night, talkative young ones to those that like them, the loud laugh of the work people at their meals, the angry bass of disjointed friendship, the faint tones of the sick, the judge with hands tight to the desk, his pallid lips pronouncing a death sentence, the heavy-ho of stevedores unlading ships by the wharves, the refrain of the anchor lifters, the ring of alarm bells, the cry of fire, the whir of swift streaking engines and horse carts with premonitory tinkles and colored lights, the steam whistle, the solid roll of the train of approaching cars, the slow-marched play at the head of the association marching 2 and 2. They go to guard some corpse. The flag tops are draped with black muslin. I hear the violoncello, 'tis the young man's heart's complaint. I hear the keyed cornet, it glides quickly in through my ears. It shakes mad sweet pangs through my belly and breast. I hear the chorus, it's a grand opera. Oh, this is indeed music. This suits me. A tenor large and fresh as the creation fills me. The orbic flex of his mouth is pouring and filling me full. I hear the trained soprano. What work with hers is this? The orchestra whirls me rider than Uranus flies. It wrenches such ardors from me I did not know I possessed them. It sails me. I dab with bare feet. They are licked by the indolent waves. I am cut by bitter and angry hail. I lose my breath, steeped amid honeyed morphine. My windpipe throttled in fakes of death. At length, let up again to feel the puzzle of puzzles, and that we call being. Now, it'll be significant that we're going to end with ontology, one of our big five, of course, epistemology, what you can know, ontology, who you are, right? Notice we're going to finish, and notice that being here will be capitalized. Now, as I have said in many lectures preceding, especially with Song of Myself, it's fascinating to go back and take a look at the 1855 edition and listen to the opening line of passage 26 and these opening words. Notice, he says it this way, I think I will do nothing for a long time, but listen, and accrue what I hear into myself and let sounds contribute toward me. Now, I think in some ways the 55 edition sometimes is better than the edited edition. Notice, I'll let you decide on this count whether it's true now. Notice that we will begin with the word now. And as we said, we're going to move through now passages 26 through 38 with a certain sense of a different kind of focus. Notice he says, I'm going to do nothing but listen. Now, let's point out for your notes, there are a lot of different ways to listen. That's obviously one of the 2A messages here, right? To accrue, gather, what I hear into this song. Notice he will constitute Song of Myself as a single poem, although obviously in our deathbed edition with numbering, in the original 55 not so, to let sounds contribute toward it. Now he's going to give us a long list. We've seen this before. We saw it in Starting from Pomander. We saw it in a number of earlier poems in Song of Myself. This repetition of a single word, anaphoria. Notice it will be for 3 times. I hear, I hear, I hear. Then it will be the angry, the judge, the heave-ho. Okay, so we're working with that anaphoria. And now it's just a matter, quite literally, of Whitman walking the streets of New York and elsewhere and hearing and taking in all of the information and then somehow representing it. He says it this way. I hear bravaras of birds, right? This is a musical, technical skill, bravaras, right? Think about Shelley Skylark in our comments there at learnstrong.net. Notice all of the different kinds of verbs. Bustle of growing wheat. Gossip of flames. It's a beautiful way to say it, right? Clack of sticks cooking my meals. By the way, notice the 4, right? I hear the sound I love, the sound of the human voice. Now I want to take us back to a certain Contrachia and in the inscriptions passage, just to remind you that Whitman is going to have said that in the New York opera season of 1852 to 53, there were 10 times that Madame Marietta Alboni will have sung, and he is said to have watched every one of them. And scholars have pointed out that from his journals, Whitman has constantly said how much voice and music will matter for his making of these poems. I hear all sounds running together. Again, that notion of the integral vision. Combined, fused, or following. Sounds of the city, sounds out of the city. Again, Whitman is not only the poet of the city, but he's also the poet of the rural, as we've said, right? Sounds of the day and night. And then notice he's going to 2 times emphasize young people in this poem. Talkative young ones to those that like them. And then we've got an interesting missing line here that I'll just share with you from the 55 edition that I find fascinating as well, and worthy maybe of a few moments of our attention. Let's take a listen to it as well. He says it this way: the recitative of fish peddlers and fruit peddlers. That is to say, the people in the street who are just out selling stuff. He edited this one out. The loud laugh of work people at their meals. And of course, I hear America singing. Well, this will take us back to the inscriptions poem, right? And then a very interesting juxtaposition. The angry bass of disjointed friendship. Taking us, of course, back to that fact that Whitman is the great poetry of harmony, but he's also the great poetry of disharmony as well. And so here we are, the faint tones of the sick. Whitman, of course, serving as nurse during the Civil War, and we'll have more to say about that during the drum taps. He knew about the faint tones of the sick. The judge, here's a compelling image, and we think about Tolstoy's Death of Ivan Ilyich in our comments regarding that novel. The judge with his hands tight to the desk, his pallid lips pronouncing a death sentence. The original 55, by the way, was not pallid but shaky. You can decide which one of the 2 you like better. The heavy-ho of stevedores, dock workers, unlading ships by the wharves, the refrain of the anchor lifters. It is one of the difficulties of reading Leaves of Grass today, is that unless you spend any time down at the wharves, and often it's very hard to get anywhere near the wharves, and of course the ships that are there, and the workers that work there because of security issues. But in Whitman's day, everyone would have known this, okay? And Whitman spent quite a bit of time as well in Boston, so he knew in the Boston harbor the way that this would happen. The ring of alarm bells, of course we cannot hear alarm bells and not think about T.S. Eliot's Dry Salvages. The cry of fire, the whirl of swift streaking engines, of course we have, in other words, the fear of fire, and of course large numbers of times fires will have destroyed large parts of the New York City. Horse carts with this premonitory, the warning tinkles and colored lights. Then we've got the steam whistle, the solid roll of the train of approaching cars, the train. Put it in your notes. Well, this will be significant. The train will factor heavily for Whitman in the making of what makes America so important and so great again, in its history. The slow march played at the head of the association, marching 2 and 2. Now we've got a funeral procession. They go to guard some corpse. The flag tops are draped with black muslin. We're going to hear more about this in drum taps. Then he'll move specifically to music. I hear the violoncello, 'tis the young man's heart's complaint. I hear the keyed cornet, In the 55 edition it says, or else the echo of sunset. It's a beautiful line that was edited out. It glides quickly in through my ears. It shakes mad sweet pangs through my belly and breast. We've got almost like a Dionysian ecstasy at play here, don't we? I hear the chorus. It's a grand opera. This, again, this idea that he had seen so many operas. This indeed is music. This suits me. In other words, the music of his day had a huge influence on his life. A tenor large and fresh as the creation fills me. The orbic flex of his mouth is pouring and filling me full. You'll remember in our comments on T.S. Eliot's Four Quartets that I said that Eliot said that what he wanted to do in poetry was what Beethoven had done in the Ninth Symphony and in other different pieces of music. I think what Whitman wanted to do was in poetry somehow capture the cadences of what would happen in opera. He was so influenced by it. He finishes with this one. I hear the trained soprano. The 55 edition says, she convulses me like the climax of my love grip. Now, he will have edited a line that obviously is quite controversial too. What work with hers is this? Now, I think, you can go back and decide which one of those two is more compelling. Many have said that the 55 edition is far more powerful. The orchestra whirls me wider, notice the repetition of W sounds, then Uranus flies, of course the seventh planet, often thought to be the most remote, and of course, in many ways, it was Uranus, the Greek perfection of heaven. It wrenches such ardors from me, I did not know I possessed them. And then one more time, we have another missing line, which is quite an interesting one as well. It throbs me to gulps of the farthest down horror. Now that's an interesting line to have been edited out. I'll leave to you why maybe Whitman would have decided to leave this one out. It sails me, that is to say the music. I dab with bare feet. Now this is an interesting word picture. I dab with bare feet. They are licked by the indolent waves. In other words, it's as if music is coming at him like waves of the ocean. And of course, he loved the surf, he loved to go swimming, and so he says, it's almost as if these waves are coming at me, and I don't have any way to be able to respond to them other than to just enjoy them. He says, I am cut by bitter and angry hail. By the way, the original in 55 was I'm exposed. I'm cut by bitter and angry hail, and the word angry in the 55 was not angry, but poisoned. I lose my breath. In other words, this is almost orgasmic in the way in which he will describe the way music has this powerful effect on him that will somehow just overcome him in profound ways. Steeped amid honeyed morphine, we've made comments about the fact that morphine is the drug that's starting to find its way into popular culture in Whitman's day. My windpipe throttled in fakes of death, fakes, of course, the turns or the coils of rope, at length let up again. We have the culmination and then the conclusion. To feel, and then he calls it the puzzle of puzzles. And that we call being. Notice being here capitalized. In other words, music for Whitman allows him to come to the question of, who am I anyway? And what is this thing called life and being? Well, it's finished now quickly at 2a. Well, obviously, one of the major messages here is the power of music to be able to lead us to some kind of sense of, in fact, who we are. And it is interesting to ask about your playlist. Why those songs? Think about that for a moment. All of us have playlists. Why those songs? Why not other songs? Now, many students will say, because those are the songs I like. But let's be fair. That's a 7th grade answer. What is the real answer? Why those songs as opposed to other songs? And Whitman will argue, because those songs that are on your playlist that you listen to again and again, they somehow define you. They tell you who you are. They explain things to you about yourself. And you can't put all of that into words. But you know there's something about coming back to a song that you love, like coming home. At 2b, well, I'm going to point out all these edited lines and why so much of these edited lines didn't make it into the final version, and I'll let you decide, right? Maybe some of those lines a little bit too much, and Whitman didn't want to cross that line too many times in the publications of Leaves of Grass. Of course, the anaphoria and the repetitions are as well a power. And notice that even in the reading of these lines, we've said, of course, that if you're really playing the game of Talks with Walt, that you'll take these poems on your own and you'll read them out loud. And I hope that as you do that, you will begin to enjoy the power of the rhythm, especially because he's talking about the joy of the voice, the human voice, especially in music. So go ahead and read these lines out loud and try to capture some of the cadences and rhythms. I think Whitman would be very pleased that we're trying to do that. At 3A, well, guys, I've said it already in our earlier lectures. Go through all of Leaves of Grass, and just every time Whitman begins to play the game of music, pay attention, and it'll kind of blow you away. Okay. I also like to think about Keats's Ode on a Grecian Urn. Remember those lines? Heard melodies are sweet, but those unheard are sweeter. Therefore, ye soft pipes play on. Right? That idea that there is something really provocative about music, which is why it captures even very small children. And then finally at 3B, as a way to kind of own a text like this, what about yourself? What is the music that moves you? Does music in fact move you this strong? And does it help you to understand something of who you are and what you are? What is your favorite tune and why? See, this is a fun question. So if you only had one song that you could listen to before you flatline, because, I mean, as we've said, you got to leave the park. The van has always been waiting. You don't get to swing at the park forever. You ain't met no 200-year-old people. On your way to the van, to speak now metaphorically, what tune do you want in your ears? And more interestingly, why? See, it's an interesting question. Is it the same tune you would have had when you were in 6th grade? Most of you will say, probably not. I've learned something about music, and now I have a different tune. I wonder when you will go bye-bye from the park. How old will you be? And I wonder what that tune will be that you're listening to at the time. Well, let's move on now to more ontology with passage 27, and we'll enjoy more of Whitman's voice. Thank you.